Story 1. I'll need to be a bit vague. Around 10 years ago, I was brought in to revive a failed company. 50 employees were reduced, before I showed up, to 3 to try to restructure it. It specializes in very custom, small-batch parts that require high precision. Bob was an employee I soon hired. Over 2 years, I led a complete restructuring. Cut out unnecessary steps. Invested in tech. Eventually, we grew to $10 in revenue and more, with a general goal of a $100K of profit per employee going to the parent organization. It was successful for years. Bob was okay. He had a few skills. He wasn't great, and to maintain our goals, he needed to go. I warned Bob that he had 2 months to find a new job, that I would give him a good review for what he was good at, but not for what he was bad at. He would need to maintain a good output of what he was good at, or we'd have to let him go right away but would be flexible for interviews, etc. To Bob's credit, we saw no decrease in effort, although low bar. He finds a job at a company we partnered with. Didn't use me as a reference. Good for Bob. Years later, I fly out to visit the partner. To my surprise, Bob greets me with my main contact, Charlie. Happy enough to see Bob, we shake hands. Catch up quickly. Charlie then goes on to say how lucky I was to have had Bob because of all the transformative things he did. Really got us out of a mess, which of course was all the things I did and Bob was not good at. Charlie added a small, well, a guy in the hill helped. I was shocked, angry. I said nothing other than well, I'm glad Bob found a good fit. Years pass. I bump into Bob occasionally. It's performative. I leave the company, on to my next adventure. The company does okay in my absence. COVID and other events knock the entire industry around, but I left the company in good hands and it does okay. I remain friends with the new general manager that I hired. Bob loses his job. Surprised he kept it as long as he did. He applies to my former company for a prestigious role. The GM calls me to ask about Bob. They didn't overlap. Asks about Bob's claims of all the transformative things they did. Is ready to hire them. I tell the truth. Bob doesn't get the job. Karma is sometimes real. It isn't always efficient.
Story 2 *. So I worked in a technical support team based at a client site late in the 90s. One of my colleagues, bit of a dickhead, didn't like sharing information, left our company and went to work directly for the client. Okay, it happens. Some months later, I had an interview to also work for the client. I absolutely killed the interview's whole day of various tasks with a dozen people. Until it got to the final interview that this ex-colleague was also asking questions. I found out later that I did not get the job because ex-colleague had said I asked too many questions at work. Well, duh, yes, I am going to ask questions about specific issues if I know you know the answer. Instead of guessing. Anyway, some months later, it was early December, everyone turned up at the site as normal, only to be called into a meeting with our boss, who must have flown in that morning, and the main client manager. Within 10 minutes, we were escorted to our desks to collect personal belongings and escorted off-site, made redundant on the spot. It seems our ex-colleague had managed to cause enough issues and blame his old colleagues that the client, his new boss, cancelled our support contract, and it took me 3 months to get a new job, and I had to work and live away from home during the week. A few months into this job, I saw the ex-colleague go into my manager's office. I wanted to punch him there and then. But anyway, I waited until he was leaving and made sure to pass him and throw a quick hi as he was leaving. Pikachu face. Describes it perfectly, even if it wasn't a thing back then. After he left, I went into my manager's office and he confirmed he was interviewing him. I asked if he asked ex-colleague on why he left previous job. He said no, yeah, this boss was not too bright. As it happens, I knew why ex-colleague was sacked. Not long after the rest of us were made redundant, taking his secretary away on conferences, training courses, etc. that she had no business being at. Yes, he was married. So in the end, ex was not offered a role at the company. In the end, I left the company after 6 months so I could work closer and be home every night. But will always be grateful to that company for giving me the opportunity to get one over a guy who had got me made redundant, since I cost him financial hardship for a while longer as he did not get the job. I am not so sure how petty this was, but made me happy anyway.
Story 3I, 30s have been a people pleaser to a fault my whole life. I have been working in marketing for 10 plus years. Over the years, I've had my fair share of bosses who were good, average, and some who sucked. There is one in particular that stood out as awful. This story is from about 5+ years ago. Pamela, 40s, not real name, was the VP of Marketing and Sales for a mid-size retailer. She started at the company a few years after I did. And if rumors were true, she was the fourth pick for the position and was simply hired so the company could appease shareholders. I was a manager under her, and my whole job was to make sure the website and stores had their products merchandised properly, received all their monthly sales materials, managed advertising, set up and managed the department's budget, PM'd all department projects and operations, created reporting to reflect sales, managed presentations, creative briefs for future projects, etc. In short, I did her work and all the administrative grunt work to keep the department afloat. I managed all this because I had access to her email and many times sent emails on her behalf to keep the department functioning. Pamela spent most of her time showing up after 10 a.m., taking business lunches, and planning company parties. Don't even know why we did those, but I planned those too. I consistently questioned why she spent so much of our budget on these events when we didn't have the budget resources for any of it. Pamela told me to take from future months' budgets to pay for the current month's overspending. So, at the start of every month, I had an original budget, and by the end of the month, I had to turn in an edited budget, edited under Pamela's direction, that made it look like Pamela's spending was under control. This is important for later. I definitely made mistakes here and there being in charge of so many tasks and constantly found myself working 12-hour days split between being in the office and working after my kid went to bed. Weekend work was also done before my family woke up and after they went to bed. During Pamela's first major holiday season, sales were shit. Pamela kept changing her mind on the visuals for the stores, kept bringing on new advertising and PR agencies to bring in sales. All these agencies consisted of her personal friends, and ignored our buying merchandise team's planned promotions for her own better ones. At this time, I had been dealing with an ongoing infection that turned to sepsis and was hospitalized. The doctors and my husband said it was due to the stress of work and that I needed to take a break. As I recovered, I realized how much I was hurting myself, my family, and even the company I worked for. Eventually, my old habits got to me, and I got on my phone and checked mine and my boss's emails. What I found made my blood boil. First, I got a lovely bouquet of flowers from upper management wishing me well, and I knew that Pamela organized the delivery. She sent me her favorite flowers. I went to her inbox to put the receipt in the correct folder to send to accounting when I got back. At the top of her inbox from the past 3 days were emails clearly not related to business. What I found in her emails was Pamela emailing her personal friends griping on how I can't just shake off sepsis and get back to work. She also complained that she couldn't find any of my notes, spreadsheets, or documents for any of the work she was technically in charge of. They were on our shared drive labeled very clearly. Finally, I found an email where she sent a friend from a previous company asking for advice on how to bring in sales and save her job. In this long thread, this old colleague asked if there was anyone managing most of the work, and of course, Pamela said I was. This colleague explained that clearly it was my mismanagement that was causing issues, and that I could be blamed if sales didn't pull through by the end of the season. Pamela mentioned that I was in the hospital and repeated comments from her other email thread. This person said that she couldn't outright fire me because it could seem like retaliation because I needed to take emergency medical leave. But if Pamela could prove I was stealing from the company or misusing company resources, then she would have grounds to have me fired and use me as a scapegoat. Upon my return, Pamela called me into her office and said she was worried I was taking on too much and wanted to take work off my plate. She announced was taking managing the department budget off my plate. She asked me to only drop of a small stack of invoices to accounting. Additionally, Pamela told me under no circumstances was I allowed to talk to accounting about anything regarding budgets. Also, if I had any concerns about the department or workload, I wasn't allowed to go to HR. I had to discuss it directly with Pamela. Oh yeah, I could see where this was going. Unfortunately for Pamela, I had built a rapport with Lois, 50s, not real name, who was our main accountant. Lois always said that she would do everything in her power to help me, should I ask. Knowing this, I grabbed the stack of invoices off Pamela's desk to give to accounting. I also added the email threads I read while I was in the hospital, and the current unedited budget that Pamela hadn't touched yet for the month. I also found in my filing cabinet the hard copies of old budgets with Pamela's handwriting on what numbers to change to balance our budget. Finally, I added an email from our first round of budget adjustments where Pamela Subtlety threatened to put someone else in my job if I couldn't do what she asked. So, I walked and dropped off the invoices to accounting when I bumped into Lois. She brought up invoices, and I sternly looked at her and said, "Pamela is the only one in our department that Lois is allowed to talk to about our budget and invoices." Lois saw the suspiciously thick file folder on her desk, gave a firm nod, and lovingly kicked me out of her office. Within the week, Pamela was fired. From what I understand, she has been continually job hopping for the past few years. The CEO and HR brought me in to personally apologize for everything I went through and gave me a paid 1-week vacation to take at my discretion. Given other issues with this business, I left after another year. Which brings me to today. I am, once again, a manager for sales and marketing. I have a wonderful boss, Mike, 40s M, who trusts my business decisions and backs me up on practically everything. We are hiring my team for me to solely manage and direct. Today, I looked through the applicants and found Pamela's resume sitting among dozens of others. I stared at her name, wondering how many other people share her name. Upon review, yup, it's her. She definitely fell down the corporate ladder, with VP of our old company being the highest title she earned. And, to no surprise, she embellished her achievements, claiming the work I managed as her own, and claimed she generated an 87% sales growth during the holiday season at our previous company. As a people-pleaser, who firmly believes in giving everyone a chance, it has never been so satisfying to click disqualified. Edit. To those suggesting I interview her to see her reaction, I would have loved to see her face as she walked in, but I felt it would have risked my boss's trust in my decision-making ability. Maybe I'll send a personally written rejection email.
Story for Asterisk. I was hired by a company as an assistant manager, a job I was well qualified for. The owner is rarely on site, as he owns several businesses. The company is run by a GM who hired me, but who works mostly second shift, and who I therefore would have little daily contact with since I was hired for first shift. I was assigned to Eva for training. Eva was a manager and had been with the company 5 years. I trained with her for a few days, and then I was on my own, though she and I had overlapping shifts and would see each other a few days a week. We were friendly but not close. After a few months, I was doing well at my job, and had even gotten some new procedures adopted to help boost sales. Eva began to act resentful. She would correct me for small things and took any opportunity to remind me that she had trained me. It didn't matter to me. She wasn't my boss. I reported to the GM, so I mostly just ignored her. What I didn't know was that Eva was not just tight with the GM, but they had worked together at another place for 10 years before this one. One day at shift end, GM asks to talk. Tells me it's not working out. Says I'm still making mistakes at 6 months that I shouldn't be. I ask for examples. A few of them were petty matters Eva had mentioned, but most of them were just not true. I tried to argue, but it was clear that I was set up. I decided to reach out to the owner since I had nothing to lose. He was sympathetic but said he relies on GM to run the business and had to support her decision. Then he mentioned that if things hadn't been so bad between me and Eva, it probably could have been worked out. That's when I knew she was behind me being fired from a job I needed, really liked, and was making great money, ... And I vowed to get revenge. I started searching her online info. In less than an hour, I had uncovered gold, thanks to one of those pay services about 3 months prior. Eva was arrested and charged with DWI in a neighboring state. The court records showed she had a hearing coming up in a few weeks. That was enough to get her fired. It affects the professional license she and I had to have as management. Per state law, license holders must report criminal charges to the licensing board, and in the case of a DWI arrest, licenses are typically suspended pending trial. I called the owner and told him what I discovered. It was news to him. I guess since it was out of state, Eva was keeping it secret. Maybe she was hoping to get let off the charges. The next day, the owner called and said Eva was fired. He thanked me for telling him about her DWI, apologized for how I was fired, and offered me Eva's position and salary. He asked me to come in the next morning to meet with him and to cover Eva's shift. I accepted. That alone was sweetly satisfying revenge, but what happened next was the icing on the cake. I got to work extra early, met with owner and GM, and we all agreed to start fresh. Cool, it was still an hour before opening, and I was in the back of the place when I heard the front door chime. When I came out a few minutes later, Eva was there, tears flowing, begging the owner for her job back. She obviously didn't know I was there, because when she saw me, her whole body seized and her shocked expression was priceless. I walked right by her, staring her down with a shitty grin, and went outside. Eva came out a minute later and wouldn't make eye contact. As she walked away, I said, "Good luck on the 23rd. That was her court date.
Story 5. Obligatory on mobile. Okay, so I was recommended to post this story to this sub. I'm going to be honest. There are no saints in this story. There is no good guy or bad guy. I felt I was wronged and I got revenge. That said, let me give you all some backstory and get to the good shit we're all here for. I worked as a security guard for a few years at a factory. My last year I had made site supervisor and ran the guard booth. We were contractors. Our contract was simple. Make sure everyone who comes in is logged, watch the cameras, call bigwigs to pick up their visitors. Every now and then we did a walkthrough or some paperwork. Simple. And it leaves you with a lot of relative downtime depending on your shift. During my tenure, I made a few friends, a few enemies, and got along with most of the people working there. It's surprisingly easy to investigate incidents when people like talking with you. One of the enemies I made was a supervisor. Let's call him Ted. Ted had worked his way up from a line worker and felt that since he had made his way from nothing, he deserved his ego. He had squared himself firmly against anyone he couldn't control, and I never gave him his due. We all know his type. Now Ted treated his line workers pretty poorly. And more than a few came to me to report his misconduct. One of our duties was to log any of these complaints as an incident report, submit a copy to the factory admin, submit a copy to our company, and then file the original. Ted had his own folder in that drawer. Ted did not like this. Ted did not like me. At the start of COVID, we lost most of our staff in the booth. We were down to 3 guards trying to cover a 24/7 schedule. We did a lot of 12 HR shifts starting from March, going all the way to October when I left. My company struggled to fill the missing spots, hiring 2 guards during that period. Neither lasted more than 2 weeks. October came, I was burnt. Then both my remaining guards quit. I don't blame them in the least. I immediately turned in my 2 weeks and refused to work more than 12 HRs a day. After I turned in my notice, my company scrambled to replace me and the missing guards. They got my replacement at the start of my last week, and she started on a Sunday. I trained her for 1 day, and she never came back. I discovered on my last day she had claimed that I intimidated her and made her uncomfortable. She told my boss she didn't feel safe around me. Now, I was livid at this. I have never mixed business and pleasure. I'm a big guy, I work out. I have never had those intentions at work. It was a major joke anywhere I've worked because my tagline has always been, I don't shit where I eat. I was burned out. I had an amazing woman I am now dating who was coming out to see me in 2 weeks. I had spent hours training this woman. I had her scheduled during my shift for the entire week so I could walk her through everything to do with the job. I had squared off with the factory admin to keep it that way. I was doing everything I could to help her because she was coming into a major fucking mess. Admin was looking for a different contractor. Supervisors were trying to access our files. We had shit tons of sensitive information that would have let anybody move up the ladder quick, or at the least remove a lot of competition. It was chaos. At this point, I hadn't had a day off or a good night's sleep in 3 months. And the boss I had only ever talked to over the phone had arrived in person to tell me this shit. I had almost been terminated over this on my last fucking week. If I didn't have the work ethic my father taught me, I would have walked then and there. I finished my day and walked away never intending to think of that job again. Now, the story should end here. But it didn't, and this is the juicy part y'all are hankering for. See, after I left, a few friends kept me up to date on the going-ons. My replacement came back for a day and then quit, citing the long hours would keep her away from her kid. I was salty, but it's not my problem. Until a few days ago. See, Ted had found out about her allegations and began spreading rumors I had been terminated for sexual harassment. He then told people that I was a serial harasser and had caused a former female employee to quit as well. She had left as I had gotten the site's supervisor job over her. I had seniority and she had a dirty disciplinary record. She had a few incidents that had nearly gotten her fired. I didn't like this, especially given that 2-3 of the incident reports I had on Ted were for sexual harassment. What Ted didn't know is that I don't like being fucked with. While I'm quiet and unassuming, I had plenty of time to build my MAD folders. Little personal history. When I was a computer tech, I had been royally screwed over and nearly fired by my then boss. He gave me directives that were a violation of company policy, bad enough that when they came to light, I was given an immediate final written warning. Since I had no proof he told me to do what I did, I shouldered full blame. Since that day, I've created mutually assured destruction folders, MAD folders, on anyone that I felt would try to fuck me. Ted was one such person. All the originals of my folders are kept hidden in online storage, and most are never touched. But Ted pissed me off and was threatening my future job prospects. Reputation is everything. So I opened his folder. I had access to the camera system at the factory. Folks, small-town factories are disgusting. People do shit you wouldn't believe. One really popular thing to do is fuck in the parking lot. Ted had built a little harem for himself by giving better line positions to women that gave him a little action. And I had pictures and video. I made a nice little folder with some choice clips and stills. Then I sent them to his wife and oldest daughter. Dude is 20-ish years married with 4 daughters, 2 in college, 1 graduating. 1 graduating in a year or 2. No clue what happened there, but I doubt it's going well for him, and that wasn't the end. I wasn't satisfied. This never would have been a thing if that replacement hadn't used me as an excuse to duck and run. I told you all there's no saints here. During her 1 day of training, my replacement had asked me about cell phones with good cameras and a bunch of weird policy questions. A few careful questions, and lo and behold, she has an OnlyFans. I warned her that was a huge violation of our contract with the company. Any type of sex work is forbidden, as the company has clients in Vegas and some European countries, where that is legal and doesn't want any workers moonlighting. The company is incredibly strict on that. Strict to the point I could have terminated her on the spot. They are impartial. Man or woman, it is not tolerated. Thinking on this and being very irate, I track it down. And she was nice enough to have links to her premium snap. I bundle this and send it to 3 groups. My previous employer, the IRS, and her ex. She had been in a protracted custody battle with him, and our state is a little conservative. Judges here do not look favorably on sex workers. Most have a prejudice that the women are hooked on drugs and will harm the child. And I just gave her ex evidence of sex work and possibly tax fraud. If his lawyer can't get at least split custody, no child support, that on the ex for being a piece of shit. So that's my story. Let me know if y'all feel this is pro-revenge or not, because honestly, I'm not sure if I went far enough.